is the importance of understanding models. So I went through this in some detail yesterday, but I want to go through it again today because some people weren't here. And that is a theoretical model is supposed to be complete in itself. And this is really quite important because people read things like Buddhism, but also psychology or government reports and all kinds of things. And you come across models, and then you try to assemble, like, well, where do these things all fit in with each other? So, for example, my example is the population of Thailand. You can split into 55% female and 45% male. Let's not go about the ones in between. And this is a model. This is a way to get hold of what is the population of Thailand. Otherwise, you'd have to know exactly every single person in the population of Thailand. Obviously, that's impossible, so you use a model to try and understand it. We can also say that in Thailand there are 30% Chinese, 50% Thai, 10% Indian, and 10% other as ethnicity. And that's a model. If you are, for example, opening a hospital, you might want to know that because different ethnicities have different genetic diseases. They eat different diets, they have different exercise routines. So if you're building a hospital, you really want to know that kind of information. So the information is going to make a prediction if we can break down the population of Thailand in that way. You might break down the population of Thailand, 20% students, 50% working, and 30% retired. This is very important to economists because our populations are aging. And so it means that older and older people now need to keep on working a bit longer. And I noticed that in Singapore, if I came here to get a visa a few years ago, I would have to be under 55, and now I would have to be under 62. So I'm hoping by the time I get to 62, it'll be like 75, and just keep expanding ahead of me so I can continue to get my visa. So these are different ways to model something. And when you model something, the model should be able to explain and predict. The model should explain. You don't need to change the video. I'm doing a sit down again. So a model that would predict but not explain would be if you measure the tide gauges, for example, and you see the tide going up and going down. You would, after a while, if you take careful note, be able to predict with accuracy any day in the future where is the tide going to be. But unless you know about the gravity of the moon, which is what causes tides, actually 66% gravity of the moon and the 33% is gravity of the sun. And when the sun and the moon align, it makes a bigger tide. I don't know if you knew that. But that explanation of the moon is what we have, where we have the explanation. So a theoretical model should be able to predict, you should be able to make basic predictions from it, and you should be able to explain something with the model. But remember, the model isn't right or wrong. When we break down the population of Thailand, we can't say it's not 20% student, 50% working, 30% retired. It's 55% female and 45% male. That would be ridiculous, right? There are just different ways that we can come to understand the same thing. So The Buddha made endless models, lots and lots of models. And this was very typical for Indian philosophy at the time. And so some of the models that we've been looking at, mostly while I've been here, I've been looking at the model of process. Shall I go over this again briefly? Toyota again? No, you've seen it 4 or 5 times already. I would think of another one. Okay, briefly, we have a model of, within Buddhism, we have a model of process. I'm going to write it down. Can't stop me. So, we have a model of process would be dependent origination. The model of So these are the basic models that you had in Buddhism. That, remember, what we're looking for in Buddhism is, why do you suffer? That's the only thing that we're interested in. Making models of how the world works and how biology works and how society works and how families work. That wasn't the Buddha's expertise. If people asked him questions, he would give answers. So he would often give little bits of advice about these things. But normally his advice was, well, everybody do good and then we'll all be happy. So when he was trying to analyze something, what he's analyzing is this, right? This thing that suffers. Where does this suffering come from? What is it? Where does it cease? And how can we bring it to cessation? And so these were the Four Noble Truths, and this sets the framework for the entirety of the Buddhist tradition. It's all aimed back at this suffering. So there are many things that the Buddha didn't talk about. For example, some people who follow the Big Bang, do you all believe in the Big Bang? Yeah? Who cares? I actually don't think the Big Bang happened. There's quite a few physicists in the world that don't accept Big Bang theory. In fact, the word Big Bang, I don't know if you know, I can't remember who it was now, but he invented this word for the theory as a joke to make people think it was ridiculous, so nobody would believe it. And of course the name caught on and everybody liked the name Big Bang. This is a bit like Margaret Thatcher. You know, when the Russians were trying to insult Margaret Thatcher and they called her an iron lady, she said, oh, I'll take that. So she loved it. Made it into her standpoint. So there was one particular sutta, the Buddha describes the universe folding up on itself. And then from a point of nothingness, the first layer of the highest realms unfolds. And Brahma God appears in that realm. And then he looks around and thinks, well, I must be God because I'm here on my own. And then he thinks, I'm a bit lonely. And poof, somebody else appears. And he thinks, I must have created them. And then the next layer of heaven unfolds, the next layer of heaven unfolds, and the next one, all the way down to the hell realms. And that at some point in the future, these are going to fold back up. So in Big Bang Theory, I don't know if you know, there's a few variations, but Big Bang Theory said that everything started from a point of nothingness where laws of physics don't apply. That's one reason why I don't trust this theory, because I think laws of physics always apply. Then the universe spreads out and in the Big Bang, but some people say that there's enough matter in the universe that eventually it will start sucking everything back in, and this is called the Big Crunch, right? Big Bang, Big Crunch theory. So this is kind of like what we see in this Buddhist sutta, the realms all unfolding and then folding back up. There was one interesting parallel in this, in that in string theory, which some things I know quite a lot about. String theory, I tried a couple of times, and I have no idea what it's on about. But in string theory, it does say that 3 dimensions are unfolded, and all other dimensions are folded in on themselves, so they have no spatial dimension. And that's also actually what you find in heavenly realms in Buddhist cosmology. Other than this realm, beings can go any distance to any place in an instant, because there is no distance. So some people try and use this very strange sutta, which may not or may not be original, and say, see, the Buddha talked about the Big Bang. He was a scientist. I think these kind of things are quite far-fetched. At no point in my reading of Buddhism did I see the Buddha try and talk about the physical world, the world around us. What he talked about was suffering. What he talked about was experience. So he used a whole bunch of different models to do this. And this is why a lot of the models mix the terms up. Yesterday, Eiling here was saying that she has perception before feeling. I was thinking about that all night, you know. I now have an answer for you. Do you want know my answer? One of the problems is in the translation of terms, and perception is sanya. And when we look to the suttas for definitions of things, we have 2 kinds of definition. One where the Buddha or other teacher would give us a clear definition. The other instance is we can tell by the context what a word means. So sanya actually means, as far as we can tell, it's the least best defined term in the entire set of suttas, in my opinion. As far as we can tell, sanya means identification. It's a process of identifying what something is. Whereas the English word perception kind of means you're conscious of it. But consciousness comes early on in the process, right? You have the eye, you have the form, you have attention. These 3 together, we get consciousness. Of what you're conscious, you feel, and from feeling, you have identification. From identification, you have thinking. From thinking, you have the scattered mind. So that was what I wrote at the top here, process. This was an analysis by process. So my example is these kids on YouTube who like to play pranks on people. Don't know if you ever see these YouTube things. You know, a guy, I saw one today, a bit ashamed admitting it. I may or may not have seen one today of wasting my time on YouTube, of a guy dressed as a tree, and he stands on the sidewalk, and then as people walk past, he goes like this and scares them. So imagine it this way: if you're in a seat and you're dozing, and someone takes one of those air horns and blasts it close to your ear, first of all, you're going to have consciousness of it, but as soon as you have consciousness of it, you will have liking and disliking, pleasant and unpleasant. And that would come before identifying what it was, right? You would feel the unpleasantness of that noise before you would be able to identify what it is. So that was my answer. It took 24 hours to come back to you. Yeah. One of the...
Mixed up perception with
Yes, Perception isn't awareness of the object. It's yeah. Right. So that's consciousness of the object. Sanya is identification. But these terms, especially conscious sanya, perception, is not well defined in the scriptures. So we always have this problem that within the Buddhist teachings there are a lot of inconsistencies. And so this gives room for doubt. And what I do like to do is I like to be clear when I take something from an original sutta or scripture, when I take something from my own experience of, or my own understanding of that teaching, or when I take something from my own individual experience. So I like to try and be clear. All of these three things have value, right? But I like to be clear about where the information is coming from. And a lot of teachers don't do that. And so you ask them a question and they answer something from their own understanding, and then you're not sure, did that come from the original? Did that come from this person? So I think this is something that's worth being clear about. So this evening we're doing this very famous sutta, and I thought we'd pick it up because it's very famous, and also because I've had a grueling 15 days. The Buddhist Fellowship has been putting me through the ringer, having me do things every single day. I did volunteer. I said stack it up, and I'm happy to do it. But this evening we're on a shorter sutta, and so we can finish a bit sooner, unless there's a lengthy discussion afterwards. So this sutta is very famous. It has a particularly famous metaphor at the end, which is a metaphor of a raft. So this is very famous and important in Buddhism, and this is the sutta from which it comes. So it's a fairly short, well, it's big text. I can even read that without glasses. So I have heard that this statement I have heard is quite funny. In Theravada, early Theravada scriptures, suttas, they always start with this phrase, "Thus have I heard," or in this case, "I have heard that." And that's the entire preamble to the sutta. Then, as you get to later suttas, it was at this grove on this day, on the third night of the full moon, 2,000 people gathered and requested the Buddha to give a teaching. It's got a bit longer, the preamble. And then later suttas still start getting even longer and saying, on this night the Buddha did come forth from his hut, and flowers sprouted in his footsteps as he came along, and he said, and it gets more and more flowery. And then you go into Mahayana suttas. The Buddha uttered these words, and rays of light shone out from his head in 1 billion directions, and each ray of light hit a universe and enlightened all the beings in that universe spontaneously in one instant, and all those beings shot out rays of light that did. It just gets more and more and more and more and more flowery. So one way of that some scholars like to try and find what they call original teachings, they often go by these words at the front. If it's "Thus have I heard," it's quite likely to be an early sutta. Personally, I'm not a big fan. You know, a lot of scholars, Western scholars, like to come and try and pick it apart. But what they usually end up doing is anything that they don't like, they reject, say, well, that's later, somebody added that in. And I don't think you can do that. This is the teachings that we have. This is the best that we have. And it's our job not to venerate them or worship them, but to try and make sense of it. Try and apply it to your own condition and apply it to your own practice. These teachings are true if you can practice them. If you can't or if you don't practice them, then they're worthless. They're just so many bits of, I would say, scripture, but now they're pixels on a screen or tiny magnetic dots on a hard drive somewhere. quite good. Some masala tea, right? Chai tea. I've been very bad today. I've been out all day. Out partying. Yeah. Out partying, and I thought nobody would know, but there was a spy taking pictures of me. Yes, Changi Airport. There's a spy taking pictures of me and sending it out on WhatsApp, and now everybody has seen me. We went to the Jewel, the new airport terminal place. I have to say, it's pretty impressive. I mean, they've done a really good job of it. So if you get a chance, it's actually worth visiting. Yeah. So the Vipers Sutta, or as I like to call it, the Six Robbers Sutta, that's what confused you, right? When you they're trying to look up the suttas, I call it Six Robbers. It's actually called Vipers. So, monks, again, very, very short preamble. Suggests that it's an early sutta. So, monks, suppose there were 4 vipers of utmost heat and horrible venom, and a man would come along desiring life, not desiring to die. I really like the sutta language, the way that they state these kind of things. I mean, it should be obvious, but these kind of phrases, desiring life, not desiring to die, would, you know, in the Indian mind, when the Indian mind does philosophy, it's very complete. Likes to think things out from every angle and every possibility. So you can imagine in India at the time, they would give this sutta, imagine 4 vipers, and a man was to come along, and there'd be someone in the audience. You know, what if the man didn't want to live? So, okay. A man desiring life and desiring not to die was to come along. Very much the kind of Indian mind here. So, desiring happiness and loathing pain. And people would tell him, good man, these 4 vipers of utmost heat are yours. Time after time they must be lifted up. Time after time they must be bathed. Time after time they must be fed. Time after time put to rest. This repetition aids the recitation, right? Makes it easier to chant. And if any of these vipers ever gets angry with you, then you will meet with death or deadly suffering. Do what you think should be done. So that man would be afraid of the 4 vipers, and he would flee this way or that. So these 4 vipers represent the 4 elements. And the 4 elements, often translated as earth, wind, fire, and water, but actually they're solidity, fluidity, heat, and wind. And if you translate them that way, these are things that you experience in the body. And one of the main ways that they had of understanding the body and diseases in the body was the interaction of these 4 elements. So there was this particular simile was given quite often, and it was given like this. Imagine a bag with 4 vipers in it, and you were to put your hand into this bag, and one of the vipers would bite you, and you would suffer death or deadly suffering. Well, that's your 4 elements of the body, heat, the solidity, fluidity, heat, and wind. And when one of them goes out of whack, out of form, it will cause you either disease or even death. So this idea of 4 vipers was quite common throughout the scriptures, and was one of the ways that they talked about illness. They talk about your wind being out. I don't know how much do you ever do the Ayurvedic thing where they measure your pulse? You've done that one? Yeah, Chinese, more of a Chinese thing. The guy who does it on me is, it's a Rishi, I don't know what you call it, a Rishi, I guess. It comes from a tradition that comes from India, but is in Thailand. And it's an ordination lineage, but they do these weird things like sitting in vats of boiling oil, or never cutting their hair. They have tiger skins, which I think is a little outdated, but Anyway, he comes and does the testing of my pulse, and he'll tell me that you're too solid, or you're too liquid, or you're too windy. And I'm not a big believer in alternative medicine. I'm a believer in hospitals and clinical trials. That's just me. But he can tell an awful lot about what kind of stage I'm at just by measuring my pulse, right? Just by this kind of thing. So there's something to this idea of the four elements and the body. So this idea of four vipers says that you're in an unstable body and you don't know at what time or when one of these parts of your bodily system is going to cause you suffering or death. So it's a teaching on the instability of human life. So, yeah, now I'm getting confused with the mass. So that man, hearing about these four vipers, would flee this way or that. And someone would tell him, good man, there are 5 enemy executioners chasing right on your heels, thinking that as soon as we see him, we'll kill him right on the spot. What do you think should be done? So this man, he's already afraid of 4 vipers, which of the utmost heat and venom, and he's already afraid of the 5 enemy executioners, would flee this way or that. So it kind of reminds me of the old woman who swallowed a fly. Do you guys have that one? Did you ever learn? Nobody learned that one, that rhyme? I know an old woman who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed a fly. Perhaps she'll die. I know an old woman who swallowed a spider. It wriggled and wiggled and tickled inside her. She swallowed the spider to catch the fly. I don't know why she swallowed the fly. Perhaps she'll die. I know an old lady who swallowed a bird. How absurd to swallow a bird. She swallowed the bird to catch the spider that wriggled and wiggled and tickled inside her. She swallowed the spider to catch the fly. I don't know why she swallowed a fly. Perhaps she'll die. I know an old lady who swallowed a cat. Fancy that. She swallowed a cat. She swallowed the cat to catch the bird. She swallowed the bird to catch the spider, swallowed the spider to catch the fly. I don't know why she swallowed the fly, but now she's bound to die. So that's kind of like this one. They keep adding more and more things in. That rhyme, by the way, is taught, and I don't know why people don't get the meaning of it, but the meaning is something small happens to you and you start to conflate it into something big, and you make it into such a big problem that eventually it's going to hurt you. To me, the meaning of that rhyme is obvious, but for some reason, a lot of people just think it's a nonsense rhyme, right? So, his 5 enemy executioners are the 5 khandhas, which I wrote up here. Does everybody know what the 5 khandhas are? Raise your hand if you're not really quite sure. Okay. Do you have any other color pens? I only have a black pen. So the 5 khandhas are what I like to call a freeze frame model. Just to backtrack slightly, the reason that I really like this sutta is it starts to bring all of these different models that the Buddha uses throughout his teaching. He uses different models all in the same sutta. So 5 khandhas means if at any one moment of experience we were to freeze frame your experience, stop you dead, take a slice and say, what would we find in your experience at that moment? So my example is like a Toyota. We can think about the engines of Toyotas, how many engines they have, how many kinds of wheel or interior. But the actual driving of a Toyota, a person driving a Toyota, if you were to freeze frame that, what elements are there in driving a Toyota? There's a car, there's fuel, there's a driver, and there's a destination. That might be one way to model what a Toyota is if we were to freeze frame it. And it would be a different way than if we were to use other models. So the idea is that if suffering arises in human experience, if we freeze frame you and look at what your experience is at any one moment, unless you're enlightened, what would we find? In that experience, in that moment, we would find, first of all, some kind of form, which really means sense, or sense impression, be a sound or a smell or a taste. We'd also have kind of a mind state. You would also have consciousness. We would have identification. Identification of the thing that you are experiencing. And we would also have Vedana, but I'm going to translate it as pleasant, unpleasant. So these 5 here are called the 5 khandhas. These 5 khandhas were, this teaching predates Buddhism. But the Buddha used it in a specific way, in a particular manner. So people were already talking about 5 khandhas, but they didn't know about enlightenment. So what the Buddha would do, as any good teacher would do, having discovered what he discovered, he would use the ideas and concepts in the world around him in order to explain it to people. This is quite different to what we have to do today. What we have to do is learn concepts that we're not familiar with. And so it seems kind of difficult to learn about Buddhism. But every religious teacher, in fact, every good teacher of anything, would always use the thoughts and concepts of the environment around them. I'm thinking of like Jesus and the parable of the sower. And he would... you know the parable of the sower? He would, a man who drops seeds onto stony ground, sandy ground, boggy ground, or good ground. And the seeds on the stony ground wouldn't grow, the seeds on the sand wouldn't grow, the seeds on the boggy ground would grow, but their roots would be loose, and only the seeds on the good soil would grow into good trees. And I think he was talking about the seeds of the teaching. Some people would not appreciate it, some people would be able to use it. What they used to do in the farming communities of the time, they would have a big bag of seeds and they'd poke a hole in the bottom of the bag. And they'd get the donkey and give it a whack. And the donkey goes walking around. But you can't control where the seeds go. So this was a slapdash way of farming. And so Jesus was using this particular parable as a something that people would have known and understood at the time. So the Buddha would do the same thing. He would take thoughts, ideas, and concepts from the world around him and use those to show people how to attain to Dharma. So one of the problems with us learning Buddhism is that we don't have the context of where these ideas came from. So, for example, something like non-self doesn't make too much sense until we know what in India they meant by self, what they meant by an Atman. And an Atman, by the way, is not a self, it's an Atman. So this particular teaching on the 5 khandhas means if we were to freeze frame your experience at any one moment, so let's say, freeze frame the moment from when I'm taking a slurp of my chai tea. What's in my experience? At that moment, one moment, what I'm experiencing is the taste of the tea, the drinking of the tea. So I have the form, which is the taste of the tea. I have a mind state. I can be happy, unhappy, bright, dull. My mind state will be different. I carry a mind state around with me. Consciousness of that, as opposed to consciousness of the computer over here, or consciousness of you in front of me, my consciousness is of that. I have an identification. I know what it is that I'm doing. I'm drinking a cup of tea. And I have pleasant or unpleasant experience. In this case, pleasant experience. And that would be complete what I would have in the moment of, right? So these 5 khandhas were, that's what the model was. And that's why in different models we see these kind of rearranged, and consciousness comes first, then Vedana, pleasant, unpleasant comes, and then the sanya, the identification comes as a step-by-step process. It's just a different model. It just depends on what he was trying to put across at that moment. So the first model that we have in the sutta is of the 4 elements, and many suttas start with a reminder that you're going to get old, sick, and die. It's a key element to, in fact, all religious teachings. They want to remind you of these things. Did some years ago some research on people telling lies. And the researchers wanted to manipulate people, to make them tell lies, and see how easy it was to make you tell lies. So they had a test of 10 questions, and they know by giving this test out to general subjects roughly what the score would be, and most people would get, let's say, 6.5 out of 10 as an average. Then they said to the people who came in to do the test, but mark it yourself. And on your way out, come and report what you got out of 10. So what did you think? Did the grade point go up? Yeah, the grade point went up because, I can mark it myself. But it didn't go up by very much. So then they said, okay, mark the test with more subjects coming in. Mark the test yourself, then rip up your paper and throw it away, and then come and report your grade. What do you think? Did the grade go up? Yeah, the ripping up of that test is the destruction of any evidence that you might be telling a lie. So suddenly the points went up. Then they got very sneaky. They said to the women, men on average score 8. Give us your mark out of 10. What do you think? Did the women tell lies? Then they said to the men, the women score an average of 8. So who do you think bumped their score up more, the men or the women? They both bumped their score up because they thought the opposite gender was doing better than them. But who did it more, the men or the women? Men. The women did it a lot more. Sorry, ladies, but there was a standout part of the thing that really bumped the score up when they did that. They did other manipulation. Some were very interesting. They said, for every correct answer, we'll give you $1. Right? What do you think? Did the cheating go up or down? Raise your hand if you think up. People cheated more. Raise your hand if you think down. Only one. Are you going to stand against all these people? Why do you think it went down? Guilty conscience. Yeah. It went down because people didn't want to cheat for a lousy $1. So cheating went way down. So then they tried $5 and it went down more. Then they tried something very interesting. You would trade in your score for tokens. So if you got 6 out of 10, you would get 6 tokens. And on your way out, you could trade those tokens in for $5. right? What do you think? Cheating go up or down? Up, because they don't see tokens as money. The point is that you're one step removed from the greediness, right? So this suggests this is why a lot of white-collar crime will occur, because cheating a bit on the taxes is you're not actually taking money from anybody. I mean, you are, but you don't feel like you are. You feel like, well, it's just a number on a piece of paper, and that's easy to cheat on. Whereas if you were to actually put the money in front of them and they could steal it and put it in their pocket, they wouldn't do it. Then they had somebody, before the test, they said to the test subjects, write down as many of the 10 commandments as you can think of, right? What do you think? Cheating go up or down? These are not necessarily Christian people, they're just regular students in America, probably not very religious. All they had to do, write down how many commandments they can remember, and then they do the standard test. Did cheating go up or down? Yeah. No, it went way down. Just that reminder of the commandments, even for people who are not Christian, or even people who can't even remember what the commandments are, just that act of being around it meant that the cheating came way down. Yeah. Another thing that made the cheating go down, which is where it relates to our screen here, reminding people they're going to die. If you reminded them that they'll get old, sick, and die, they stop cheating. Interesting, yeah. Yeah.
Tests. Yeah. In the US, when they do examinations, they just need to they just have to take or something to say that I make the vow to actually hold my honor, and then there will be no what do you call that? Invigilators for the exams, and they won't lie. They won't like generally the cheating is not so high.
Yeah, one of the ways that they stopped cheating in this experiment I'm talking about, they said write your name on the paper. And the act of writing your name on the paper will stop you from cheating, even though nobody's going to look at the paper at all. Yeah, interesting how it manipulates. They did this with salesmen, door-to-door salesmen. And they would pressure you into buying a set of encyclopedias, or I don't know what they sell these, double glazing or something. And then in America, a law was introduced that you had a 48-hour waiting period where you had the option to back out of the contract that you'd signed. So the salesmen were faced, having convinced you to buy something, and over the next 48 hours, like 50, 60, 70% of people would change their minds. So the salesman wanted a method to stop you from changing your mind. And you know how they did it? The form that you fill in for the sales order, they make you fill it in yourself. Now normally the salesman would fill in the form for you and then you sign it, right? Then you would back out. But if you filled the whole form in yourself, you wouldn't, much less likely to back out. Because something in your mind has said, I really committed to this, I did this, and I've written it down, and I can't back out. Even though, of course, you can still back out, just the same. Yeah. We psychologists are very big on playing tricks on people like this. There's a great test on lying. They had men and women strangers talk to each other in a room for 10 minutes. That's their only instruction. When they finish, they go into a next room and they're shown a video of their conversation. And they're asked to write down how many times they told a lie in that 10 minutes. No vested interest in lying, right? Who lied more, the men or the women? Anyone think the women lied more? Oh, quite a few people. Who thinks the men lied more? Nobody else? You didn't put your hand... Men or women? No idea? It was about the same. It was about the same. But what was interesting was the kind of lies that were told. The women would tell lies like, oh, that's a lovely necklace, or that's so interesting, or they would say lies to make the other person feel good, whereas the men would tell lies like, yeah, well, you know, I drive a Porsche. And I... Men's lies made themselves look good. Women's lies tried to compliment the other person. So women came out on top on that one. So it has a form to it. It's not just random. The first line in this sutta is reminding you that you're going to die. You're going to get old, sick, and die. And this will contextualize then both your life and the way that you're going to receive the teachings. So the 5 executioners who are chasing you right on the heel, and they will kill you right on the spot. So what do you think should be done? The man, afraid of the 4 vipers, afraid of the 5 enemy executioners, would flee this way and that. So why are these 5 deadly? This analysis of the 5. Why is this deadly? This is what sucks us into experiencing things. This is our whole experience, and generally you don't experience yourself. You're only experiencing the object that you look at. We tell ourselves a story that you have a self, but most of the time you're just absorbed in something. This is one reason you like to read a book. When you're reading a book, you lose awareness of yourself, right? And we like that. We like to not be aware of ourselves and diving into something. So, good man, there's a 6th executioner, a fellow traveler, chasing right on your heels with an upraised sword, who thinks, whenever I see him, I will kill him right on the spot. Do what you think should be done. So, the 6th fellow traveling executioner with upraised sword stands for passion and delight. Passion and delight. Passion and delight in what? In the 5 khandhas, or in experience. If you give up the passion and delight in experience, what happens is your mind stops going out to experience all the time, starts to return to itself and become self-awakened or evident to itself. You see this very clearly in meditation. You'll sit there going, okay, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Britain should leave the European Union. I think Theresa May has a terrible job. This poor woman in charge of Britain is thinking, forget, you realize that you've gone off. Come back, okay, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, and don't forget to get your phone from the repair shop tomorrow, because that's important, okay? And while I'm there, I could probably get a new USB cable, because I've got that USB-C thing now. And you realize you've gone again, right? And is this your experience when you meditate? So what's happening, that's what we call the mind going out to an object, or attention going out to an object. And in the Buddhist model, and remember it's only a model, in the Buddhist model, thoughts are also external. Thoughts are also considered outside. That might not make too much sense, but that's the way that it was presented. So the mind goes out to thoughts, like the eye goes out to sights, like the ear goes out to sounds. So you're sitting there and then think, no, okay, stop, forget about the phone. In, out, I wish my back didn't hurt so much. Like in, out, this, okay, in, out. And then someone behind you, their phone goes, and you're like, ugh, it ruined my meditation. You weren't meditating anyway. So you see what's happening. This is the experience of the mind continually getting absorbed into something. So mindfulness is when the mind isn't getting absorbed in something. What's that experience like? That experience is kind of self-aware, self-present, awake. I like to call it a deciding moment, because this is when I decide to do things. So if I'm absorbed in Photoshop, which will hook me in for hours and hours on end, Photoshop. I'm a god on Photoshop, but, creating posters, manipulating images, this kind of thing. And I'll be absorbed in the computer. And then at some point, I'll be like, suddenly I'm aware of myself again. And then it's like, my back aches a bit, and then I really need the bathroom. I really need a cup of tea, because I'm English. So okay, I'll put the kettle on for the cup of tea, and I'll go to the bathroom. So that deciding moment when I've broken the thing, the action that I'm involved with, I look around and then I launch myself into another action. So it's kind of like a deciding moment where you steer things, right? You steer your ship, steer your car, and go make a cup of tea, come back, put my feet up, check email, check the Facebook, watch a cat video. Okay, now I can come back to my work on the computer. So that deciding moment is actually where mindfulness has come up. You're awake, you're aware, your mind isn't going out to anything. But because this particular mind state is not valued, is not cherished, is not pointed out to you when you're young, you miss it. As soon as you have that feeling, you immediately launch into some other activity. So in our practice, as we get better at mindfulness, you get practice that holding the mind still. The mind isn't going out to anything. So the 5 khandhas is experience when you're experiencing something. So the thing that kills you is the passion and desire for the experience. The thing that we're doing in meditation is breaking the passion and desire for the experience. And that makes more sense because if you think about overcoming desire, often Buddhism says that you have to put an end to desire. That's impossible. That's just a ridiculous task. But breaking the attachment, the desire for experiencing things actually is possible. It's something you can do in meditation. And you can catch yourself at that moment. If you're really awake and aware, you catch yourself when the mind's not doing anything and you find yourself there, like clear, bright, and your mind's not moving out to anything. If you're aware, if you're observant, you'll see that throughout the day you actually have lots of these experiences. That's why enlightenment is not creating a superb firework, consciousness exploding over the universe, or absorbing like a drop into the ocean, into the eternal oneness of, and all the other nonsense that people talk about. Really, enlightenment and the path to enlightenment is remembering. It's like, oh, that's right. This was always here. This experience was always here. I'm just too busy looking outside. So, the 6th person with the upraised sword chasing after you, whenever I see him, I'll kill him right on the spot. Then this poor man, afraid of the vipers, afraid of the 5 executioners, and now he's afraid of the 6th executioner with the upraised sword, would flee this way and that, and he would see an empty village. Whatever house he entered would be abandoned, void, and empty as he entered it. Whatever pot he grabbed hold of would be abandoned, void, empty as he grabbed hold of it. So this image of going into the empty village is a lovely village, because when you're bringing your mind back from the passion and delight in experience, what do you experience? Actually, just an ordinary body. Doesn't really seem to be very much. And as you look around it, anything that you look to will start to appear empty, because you're no longer deluded or brought into it. There's the best example of this exact analogy comes from Alice in Wonderland as she goes down the rabbit hole. If you're interested, I have an excellent little video, one of my early videos, on YouTube. Some countries it's not available in due to copyright reasons. YouTube did that, I didn't do that. What I did was I took a whole bunch of different films of Alice in Wonderland, going right the way back to the 1930s, plus an audio version of the book, and showed how they portray Alice going down the rabbit hole. And it's invariably, you have this little girl falls down and it's screaming, shouting, ah, because that's exciting, right? Falling down a hole is dangerous and exciting. And she goes charging down this hole at high speed and eventually goes splat on the bottom. But when you look at the original text, that's not what it says. She goes down the rabbit hole, but while she's going down, she's looking around her. Do you remember this? You've all read Alice in Wonderland, have you? No? Okay, everyone else has. You've never read Alice in Wonderland? Okay, go and read Alice in Wonderland. And read it, don't watch the film. The film gets a lot wrong. They always get things wrong. As Alice, okay, for those of you who don't know, Alice was a little girl. Lewis Carroll, who wrote the book, was writing about the experiences in the mind. And he says at the end of the book, check if you don't believe me, all of these things that I've just been writing about are things that everyday people experience in the mind. He says that. And still, when I tell people that these are experiences, people say, oh, you're reading too much into it. Alice follows a white rabbit who's looking at his watch, goes running off, and she follows him, and the rabbit goes into a hole. Alice crawls into the hole after him and starts falling down rapidly. But as she's falling down, she sees in the wall around the hole that she's falling down shelves. And on the shelves are jars. And when she takes a jar off the shelf and opens it up, she finds nothing in it. The exact same metaphor that we have here. So what does it mean when you open a jar and you find nothing in it? When you examine your experience of sense impressions, they've actually lost all their allure. So if, for example, you eat your favorite food, but you eat it without letting your mind think anything, what you have is just a taste. It's not even Marmite. Even Marmite, it's just a taste. A sound, well, you know, a great song, Bohemian Rhapsody is coming back at the moment, right, with the movie. Great song. They told him that a 7-minute pop song would never work. He said, I'm going to do it anyway, and it became the best-selling song for about 5 years. And it's great when you follow it, and you get into it, and you start bopping to it. But if you just stop and mindfully hear it, it's just a succession of sounds that really doesn't mean anything. That's what is being portrayed here, the pot. When you actually take that pot and look, does it have anything in it? There's absolutely nothing there. Sensory experiences are nothing great if you're not getting lost in them and caught in them. So a really beautiful image of the man going into the empty village, the body, and finding these empty pots. There's a beautiful Roman myth, and it's a precursor, it's a motif that you will find later in Cinderella. And in this motif, the kind of Cinderella-like figure is left at home, and the wicked stepmother throws 5 kinds of seeds onto the floor and tells her you have to separate all of these seeds into the correct piles, right? Precursor to Cinderella, but in Cinderella there's only 2 kinds of seeds. That's because the brothers Grimm didn't fully understand what they were writing about. Should have been 5 kinds of seeds, because 5 senses. So the motif is saying, when you stop, when everyone else goes out to the party, and you're left at home in that empty room, and then you sort out the 5 piles of seeds, means you're sorting out the senses. And in the eye, there is only what you can see. In the ear, there is only what you can hear. It loses its allure when you start to examine it through meditation. So, beautiful image. He enters into the empty village, which is the body, and the pots that he grabs hold of that are empty and void are sense impressions. So somebody would tell him then, good man, right now village plundering bandits are entering into this empty village. What do you think should be done? Then the man, afraid of 4 vipers, afraid of the enemy executioners, afraid of the 6th executioner with that upraised sword, afraid of the village plundering bandits, would flee this way and that. So the village plundering bandits, if I remember correctly, are the 6 senses. So he knows that any sense that your attention goes out to, that's going to be sucking you back into experiencing things. So he would say, he would avoid the 6 village plundering bandits. So then, as he flees, he would see a great expanse of water, with the near shore dubious and risky, the further shore free from risk. But there is not a ferry boat nor a bridge going from this shore to the other shore. By the way, we're nearly at the end, so it's good. Finish a bit early tonight. The symbol of water in all story symbolizes consciousness. Whatever story you're in, water will symbolize consciousness. And water will have a range of different forms. The one extreme form is an ocean, and the other extreme form is a still forest pool, or a still glass or bowl of water. So these are the 2 extremes. The still forest pool or the still bowl of water, remember we did Monkey last week. I gave the Dhamma talk about the journey to the west. Monkey follows the stream all the way to the source. At the source he sees a water curtain, and he goes through the curtain and he sees a little house. This means you're following your consciousness all the way back to the origin, to the source. So in this case, the great expanse of water is the opposite end, is an ocean. And that's the ocean of sense desires. There are a lot of ranges in between. There are fast-flowing streams, slow-flowing streams. There's water with crocodiles in it, which had a particular meaning. This was sexual desire and lust, because the crocodiles are out there and they're going to grab you if you're not careful and make you suffer. That's how we monks talk about it to each other. They do that, the old monks to the young monks. They're like, oh, you don't look at these women in the world. They just create suffering for you. And then you say, yes, it's all suffering. And then 5 years later, they've disrobed and got married. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So the further shore is the ocean of sense desires. And a lot of the time, a lot of the emblems of the holy life was being in a boat, in a vessel. And the boat or the vessel is the teaching. And the teaching is what carries you safely over the ocean of sense desires. So, if you remember, I showed a picture a week or something ago. I did so many things, I can't remember which day it was. And you have a boat with 4 people in it. And that was actually Namarupa. The ocean is the form, is the sense desires. The 4 people are the 4 aspects of the mind. And the boat is the contact between the mind and the sense desires. So this motif of water is actually really powerful. And in psychology, many of you know I've studied psychology. I have a degree in psychology, for what it's worth. Cognitive psychology, I've never into therapy, right, which is called counseling now. That I never studied, so don't think, oh, I go to Bante and tell him my problems. No, I have no idea. I have no idea how to talk to people like that. But one of the things that you can do in therapy is we try Freudian therapy, which is a particular kind. Many therapists don't follow this, but is try to fish out of your unconscious what you think about things. Because if I ask you, right, then you're going to tell me what you think and not what you actually feel. There are some very powerful techniques to do this. I'm not going to tell you because you never know, I might sneakily do them on you and fish out of you what you think about the world around you. Or your therapist might use them. But one of the tests, not my favorite one that I do, so this is why I'll tell you this one, is they say, in fact, we can do it a little bit. Should we do it? Don't worry, I'm not going to fish into your subconscious. Only you will know the answer to the question. But just kind of settle yourself a little bit and imagine, just in your mind, gentle imagination, imagine that you've gone into a forest. And I'll ask you the questions, answer in your own mind, not out loud. So you've gone into this forest. How far apart are the trees? How tall are the trees? How easy is it to maneuver around inside the forest? What's the weather like? As you go through this forest, you meet a bear. What's the bear like? How do you feel about the bear? As you go past the bear, you come to some water. How big is the water? Is it a lake? Is it a stream? Is it fast flowing or slow flowing? What's on the other side of the water? Okay, test over. So you should be able to fill that information in as I ask the questions, right? So, who wants to volunteer? Okay, the forest, what was your forest like? It was quite dark. How far apart were the trees? Was it like close or was it spacious? Very close, very dark. Okay, and how did you feel about being in there? Scared. Did anybody experience an open forest? You had quite a few people had open forests. I'm sorry to tell you, but the open forests are good. You're one. You're in trouble. The way that you see the forest, how far apart the trees are, is how you view problems in life. So generally speaking, people that feel like they don't have too many problems and that they're able to navigate problems will experience the trees far apart. And often they'll experience the forest as quite bright and airy, or some forest flowers. You, unfortunately, have a lot of problems in your life that are closing in on you and kind of constricting you a little bit. Would that actually fit with your life? You can disagree, it doesn't matter. Would that kind of fit? Somewhat accurate, okay. As you walk through the forest, you come across the bear. Who would like to tell me about the bear? I want to find, okay, what was your bear like? A friendly bear, but standoffish and doesn't want to be touched. Did you want to touch the bear? Not really. And was the bear dangerous? Could be, but it wasn't threatening you. How about your bear? Yes. The bear.
Yeah, it was big.
Big bear.
And I couldn't get close
You couldn't get close. Did you want to get close?
I wanted to be close,
Right.
I felt scared.
But you felt scared. Okay. And was the bear dangerous at all?
Not really.
Not really? Like it might be dangerous, but it wasn't threatening you?
No.
Or it just wasn't dangerous at all? Okay. Now you may have experienced a teddy bear, right? Did anybody you experience a teddy bear? Okay. The bear, and these things really do work quite well. Does anyone know what the bear represents? Any idea? Okay, the bear is how you feel about other people. So in your case, did you want to touch or you didn't? I can't remember. You didn't want to touch. So when you meet people, you're standoffish and they're standoffish with you. You don't really want to communicate too much, but you're not afraid of people. They don't kind of oppress you. Would that be reasonably accurate? Typically friendly. Okay. Teddy bear is wonderful. You're like, people are lovely. So you also were you have wanted to touch the bear, right? But the bear was a little bit, you weren't sure if the bear was going to come to you. It suggests that you're nice and friendly with other people, but you don't know if they're going to be friendly with you. Okay. 3 bears. Okay. 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 Well, you have nursery fairy tales about the 3 bears, right? Mother bear, daddy bear, and baby bear. Yeah. So it suggests that you're a very good and friendly, nice, friendly person.
This may not be exactly accurate because, when you ask to think about it, if you have been to a forest, you have walked through the forest, so the image of what you have went through will come, no matter
Right.
how you try to block it out.
The thing is, your unconscious will pick out images. So you have actually been in lots of forests and woods and parks, but which one of these images your unconscious going to pull out? And this is why we use this test, is because your consciousness, your conscious ideas of yourself can't really interfere. I should say a lot of people think Freudian psychology is nonsense. They reject this whole idea of the unconscious, and they would not do this kind of therapy. And most modern therapists would tend not to do this kind of therapy because so much of it depends upon the analyst. What your experience coming for therapy is going to be like depends upon my analysis of what you say. And so a lot of modern psychologists will reject this for that very reason. The point is that these symbols and emblems are really quite deeply embedded within us. So you think of Snow White, and she gets, remember how the story starts, but the wicked witch, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all, and like, well, I think Snow White has got you beat now. So she goes after Snow White, and she goes into the forest, and that's a dark and a scary place. So these symbols would have been really powerful, especially to children, especially then. Maybe we need to change them now. Snow White, instead of going into the forest, she goes somewhere scary like Liverpool. And like, I was talking to the Jiao Kun, the head of Wat Ananda here, and we were talking about things, and somebody's offered some land to build a temple in somewhere near Los Angeles, and he's saying, do you want to go to Los Angeles, go and build this temple? I'm like, nah, full of Americans. I'm not. I said, set one up in England. I don't need a visa for England. We can buy land. And he said, I wouldn't mind England. I went to this lovely place, Liverpool. I was like, oh, my God. It's like, okay, let's do it in Thailand. Forget England. Just wipe that out of your mind. I don't know. He had a good experience that day that he went to Liverpool. Anyway, sorry, this isn't going out on YouTube or anything, is it? Not a bunch of Liverpudlians chasing me. Now, I'm from Manchester, and we have a rivalry with Liverpool. We're both northeast cities, you know, so. So how you experience water, we won't go into it, but when I asked you that you come to some water, was it a stream, was it a lake, was it something that you can step across? What was on the other side of the water? So the water represents your own self. And if you're overpowered by sense desires, if you're overpowered by the world, yourself, your health, you'll see a big body of water. If you're reasonably calm, collected, and know yourself very well, you tend to see a nice little stream that's easy to cross over. So these emblems are really powerful. And this is why fairy tales, well-constructed fairy tales, not just European, actually really work well at speaking to the psyche, speaking to the unconscious. And next year when I come, I'm going to do a series of talks on fairy tales. I got a new one now. I've got a Red Indian fairy tale. So, where were we? This was the water that's experienced in this simile. Remember, we've already taken the person inside, away from experience, away from desire, into the body, from the body perspective, examining what the senses are. And now, as you go in further, you see you have this seething mass of the unconscious mind in Freudian terms, which is the water. Almost every time this analogy, this metaphor appears in the sutta, the water or the sea is rough, is dangerous, is full of monsters, and you're quite likely to die if you go into it. So this represents the sea of sense desires. By the way, one of the great things, all teachers use story and metaphors when they teach, but when the Buddha used stories and metaphors, he explained it. So all these explanations that I'm giving, if you read the other end of the sutta, the Buddha explains exactly. By this I meant the 5 khandhas, by this I meant the 6 senses, etc. So the Buddha is quite unique in doing that, and it's quite handy that he did it, that we can see clearly. Otherwise you'd be like, what was that boat thing? Well, I think the boat represents, my ego. No, I think the boat represents the government and, the king who looks after you, and there'd be all kinds of disagreements. So he sees the water and he's he wants to go across because he knows the farther side of the shore is where safety is going to be. So the further shore is secure from free and risk. So he says to himself, what if I were to gather grass, twigs, branches and leaves and bind them together to make a raft, and were to cross over to safety on the other shore by depending on the raft. So the raft represents the Dharma, represents the teaching. I kind of said that earlier with the boat, right? What's interesting here is he doesn't make a yacht, doesn't make a steamliner, he doesn't make a cruise ship, doesn't make anything beautiful. The Dharma is not there to be a big, beautiful, complete thing that's to be admired. It's made out of scraps, out of the things around you. And when you get to the other side, what do you do with the raft? You abandon it, you chuck it away. So the Buddha used this analogy several times throughout the scriptures. The Dhamma is always represented as a raft, and a raft is just cobbled together from the bits and pieces that you already have around you. This is in great contrast to Indian philosophy at the time. A lot of Indian philosophy was about things in the world, whether they truly exist or not, and it was felt that everything had an essence. A river had an essence, or an Atman. A tree had an essence. And a lot of these essences came from the sound. So the sounds were really important. And when in Indian philosophy they talk about an object of consciousness, called a nama and a rupa. Nama means the sound of it. Originally, is what the thing meant. The name that you give to something. And so naming things in ancient cultures was very, very important, especially in India, especially with Sanskrit, because every little suffix and prefix in Sanskrit had a specific meaning. In Western fairy tales, when you know if some demon puts a curse on you and causes you trouble, the only way out of it is to find out the name of the demon. If you know the name of the demon or the troll or whatever it is, they can't hurt you anymore. So names were very, very important. But the Buddha's teaching was completely the opposite. He didn't construct that this is a grand explanation of the universe. No, he said, just from the bits and pieces around you, you can use that to get to the other side. So, I think we're finished now. What if I was to gather grass, twigs, branches and leaves, bind them together into a raft, sorry, I should say raft. I'm trying to make my English a bit posher. Bind them together into a raft to cross over to safety on the other shore, in dependence on the raft, which I'm making an effort with my hands and feet, i.e. to build it. The man, having done that, crosses to safety on the other shore. And having crossed over, having gone to the other shore, he would stand on the high ground, a Brahman. Very often this word, we shouldn't get confused, it just means enlightened. We want to be careful because the Buddha said the Brahmin tradition didn't get you enlightened. But that was a word that was used for somebody who was finished with the holy life. So monks, I have made this simile to convey meaning. The 4 vipers stands for the 4 great elements: solidity, liquid, heat, and wind. The 5 enemy executioners stands for the 5 clinging aggregates, the khandhas, which I wrote on here. The 6th executioner with upraised sword stands for passion and delight, notably passion and delight in experiences. The empty village stands for the 6 internal sense media. If a competent, intelligent person examines them, from the point of view of the eye, they appear abandoned, void, and empty. If he examines them from any of the senses, they appear void and empty. The village plundering bandits stand for the 6 external sense media. So the forms and the sounds and the thoughts that will come and attack you. The great expanse of water stands for the 4-fold flood, the flood of sensuality, of becoming, views, and ignorance. This was called, by the way, I'll repeat this for the audience, where I get told off. Asivisa of ignorance, becoming, senses, desire, and views. It doesn't seem like a very fancy teaching, this one, but actually this was key to the entirety of Buddhism. The asava means a flood, flooding out. As I said, consciousness is always represented by water in every tradition, including the Old Testament, by the way. I have lots of quotes on that for you if you want. Some of my favorite quotes, actually. So the asava is the flooding out of consciousness. As the citta, or the mind, goes out to thoughts and smells, goes out into the world, goes out into experiences, and goes out into activities. So the first flow of the consciousness flowing out is ignorance. And ignorance means, in this case, it's called avijja, and that means not knowing the method. So it's not ignorance like you're an ignorant person. It's not ignorance as in I'm going to ignore that. ignorance is not a great translation. The actual word means avicca. Vicca means a method. So if you're a blacksmith and you heat iron up and you beat it and you make a sword or a pot or a hoe or a rake, you have a vicca, you have a method for working the steel. So ignorance here, avicca, means you don't know the method, you don't know how to apply your mind. And because of that, you get caught up into activities. Becoming means action, bhava in this case. There's some discussion on the word bhava, exactly what it means, but I'm just going to summarize it as action. Usually it's called kamma bhava, in fact, getting caught in activities. Sense desire is quite obvious. This is something that pulls you out even further. And then views and opinions. The fourth one sometimes is missed off. Sometimes it's counted as just asava, as just the first three. Sometimes it's still four. The key point here, the definition of enlightenment, of someone who's fully enlightened, he is a kinasava, one who has stopped the asava, one who has stopped this flooding. And that's the definition of enlightenment. So this is, it may not seem like a very flashy teaching, but this is key to the whole of Buddhism, is it defines what an arahant is. So, that's it. The expanse of water stands for this flood here, including sense desires. The raft stands for the Eightfold Path. Eightfold Path. I'm really trying to improve my English accent. People tell me I sound like a northerner, so I'm trying to speak posh southern a bit more. And making an effort with the hands and feet stands for the arousing of persistence. Crossed over to the other shore means, and becoming a Brahmin means he is an arahant. And that's it. That's the story of the vipers, or the 6 robbers. Okay, so the asava is a flood. Views and opinions. Yeah, views and opinions. So there's a kind of sequence to this, not knowing the vicca, the method of applying. We actually did this one a few days ago, the sutta that defined this as action, meritorious, non-meritorious, or stationary, right? Was ignorance. So that's a movement of the mind outwards because it doesn't know the right way to apply itself. Becoming is, there's discussions on this topic, so there's some debate, but it means action or getting in an activity. So me, when I'm on my Photoshop, that's a bhava, that's an action. And bhava can be of 3 levels, either in the sense desire realm. If I meditate strongly, I'm still acting because I'm concentrating on my meditation, but that will take me into a higher realm, the rupa realm. And then if I concentrate on an abstract form, it will take me into a higher realm. So becoming or being, there are usually counted as 3. But it means being in an action. Sense desire, obviously you get, the mind flows out into sense desires. And then the last one is sometimes missed, views and opinions, by which, great descriptions of this, by which clansmen fight, argue, come to blows, beat each other with sticks, clods, weapons, and bring each other to death or deadly suffering. Views and opinions were considered very deadly. Yeah. There was one sutta where the Buddha says, lay people come to blows with each other because of sense desires, but the monks and religious people come to blows because of views and opinions. It's kind of true.
Bante, from here, freeze frame and elements look about the same because it is like 5 khandhas and the 32 parts of the body.
So remember, these ones, I want to be clear, process, freeze frame, elements and threading, that's my description. Freeze frame elements is like with a Toyota, you have 6 different kind of engines, 4-cylinder engines, large and small, 6-cylinder engines, diesel engines. You have 62 different kinds of wheel, big wheels, short wheels, fat wheels, wide wheels, high pressure wheels, Jeep wheels. You have 5 interiors, leather, velour, plastic. You have 9 kinds of dashboard, a plastic dashboard, a walnut dashboard. These are elements. So the elements will spread into a large list of everything that's possible. But which one did you freeze frame? The khandhas is if you are actually experiencing something at that second, what's involved in that experience. In that experience, there can't be 6 different senses. There is one sense. You're seeing something or you're tasting something, right? There's no limit to what you can see and taste, but when I'm sucking my tea, I'm tasting that one thing. So it's not elements. It's of this specific experience.
But Bhante, 32 parts of the body, there is no 3 hearts, five stomachs and...
Can you experience all 32 parts of your body as elements at once? You can't do it. You can experience being sick. That's an experience. 32 parts of the body was just one thing. I could also write up the 3 kinds of feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, or the 5 kinds of feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, liking and disliking, or the 6 kinds of feeling, which is liking through the eye, ear, nose, taste, tongue, or the 12 kinds of feeling, which is pleasant of the eye, unpleasant of the eye, pleasant of the tongue, unpleasant of the tongue, or the 18 kinds of feeling, which is the pleasant of the eye, unpleasant of the eye, and the neutral of the eye, the pleasant of the tongue, unpleasant of the tongue. I mean, this is elements. When we're talking about elements, it's not 32 parts, that's an example. It's all of the possible categorizations that you can come to, which is kind of what the Abhidhamma is. It lists all of these different possibilities. But you're never going to experience all of that in one moment. In a moment of experience, you have the 5 khandhas. Yeah. So that's just my way of trying to show the Buddha used different models at different times for different purposes. In this sutta, he's mentioning all of his models and bringing them together to kind of show roughly how they might link with each other. Yeah. Anyone have a question or a comment? Whether it's clear or unclear?
Thank you, Bhante, for the insights. Perhaps I would like to ask about the view asava. How do we practice not to have any views, especially in the daily, for example, in the workplace, for example,
Right.
you must have some views on, or work, for example,
If you don't have these asava, you're enlightened, you're an arahant. So you're going to have views until you're an arahant. But when you do your meditation, if you sit there and you feel when the mind starts to get caught up in something, I want Britain to exit the European Union, that's my view. That is my view. European Union banned the British Mini. For that, I will never forgive it. I built my own Mini. I built it from scratch, from bottom up, every panel. I know every nut and bolt. I know every little rubber ring in a Mini. I love Minis. And the European Union banned it, and I will never forgive them. That's my view. But if I'm sitting here doing my meditation, that view isn't there. You might think, well, I have it in my life. No. All we're interested in is that moment of consciousness, and I'm sitting doing my meditation. Unless I call it into my mind, that view isn't there. So it can't make you not have views in your life, but you can experience yourself, you can experience meditation without having any views there. You just feel the mind go out, thinking about something, bring it back. Feel your mind go to your knee, bring it back. Feel your mind go to a sound, bring it back. Feel your mind go to a memory, bring it back. At some point, you just snap and the mind is there, it's clear, bright, it's knowing, self-aware, self-referential. It's not doing anything. There are no views. Yeah. So you take note of that. It's a big thing that in Buddhist training, in monastic training, we're taught to look at what isn't there. Because one of the things that makes life hard for people is lust. And so one of the teachings that's given is be aware of when it's not there. Otherwise you feel like, well, I'm a being and I have sensual desire. You're like, no, notice when it's not there. I often notice before and after food. Before food, I have to do the chanting and my mouth is already watering. And then after the food, there's no desire there. So I note that actually the desire is delusional. When desire is there, it tells you that it's always going to be there. But when you notice when it's not there, you realize that you can be free of it. Yeah. So views and opinions, yes, you'll have them in your lifetime, but notice in the meditation that when everything stops, there are no views or opinions there. There's no me, there's no other, there's no right, no wrong, no self. Just clear, beautiful experience. Yeah, so noting when things are not there is very important. Otherwise, you have things like people come and they say, oh, I have so much anger. Well, you're not angry all the time. When you notice how much of the time you don't have anger, you don't consider yourself as a person who has anger. You consider yourself as a person who every now and then goes and picks anger out of your bag, brushes it off, and makes yourself angry over it. I always think this with memories, that memories are like a bag that you carry around with you, and then every time you have 10 minutes spare, you get that deciding moment, you're fishing around in your bag like, oh, I'll pull out this memory. This guy stole 500 pounds off me once. I should have done this to him, I should have beaten him. And then you chuck that out, you fish out another memory like, oh, wasn't it lovely when I went to Hawaii? It's like, you can carry this bag of stuff around with you all the time. What if you just put the bag down and don't call any of it up anymore? You've total freedom from it. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, you guys are all really focusing in on the absolute enlightenment. Right. Okay, I can repeat the question. What do I mean by lack of ignorance or going past ignorance? Being without ignorance is the definition of being enlightened, of being an arahant. Ignorance means avijja. Vijja means method. Like you know the method to heat up steel, bang it, make a pot, make a sword, make a rake. That's a vijja, that's a method that you know what to do with a lump of steel. So vijja means here not knowing how to apply the mind. So you apply it in the wrong way. And by applying it in the right way, you get thrown into this whole process of suffering. When you know the right way to apply the mind, you're like, the whole process doesn't occur. Yeah, that's the definition of being enlightened. Yeah.
Oh, hi. Okay, I think to some extent, those things that you described earlier on helps with my question. But so right now, when I'm listening to you or doing anything which is Dharma, I feel lesser of this. For example, in this class itself, once I step out from this, all things comes in, and I can't. That's why it says flood. I can't. I'm being pulled in all directions. What can I do when I'm feeling good with you listening to all these things? That once I snap out of it, whether is it meditation or not, I'm back,
Yeah.
pulled all over the place, and I cannot apply. I'm not at that stage which I can apply all these good.
Okay. All you can do is keep doing the practice. These things start to slot into place as you do the practice. Usually what happens is you project, so you get overwhelmed by a whole bunch of things, and then you think, well, to be like nice and serene and meditating, I'm going to have to overcome this anger and this greed and this lust and then this worry about my health and the worry about politics and the worry about whether Donald Trump is going to set off a nuclear bomb. And you feel like, well, I have all these things that I have to fix, and it's overwhelming. But actually, the meditation occurs like outside of all that. And there are certain times when you just become aware, and you're like, all of those things are not here now. So you don't have to solve all of these problems. You learn how to turn the attention around, back inwards. And then you find a lot of these problems are actually go away. This is what I found in my time. When I ordained as a monk, I had a lot of problems and a lot of confusion, and my initial problem was confusion. I changed lineages from a Ajahn Chah lineage to a different lineage, a Dharmakaya lineage. And I was really confused. And my abbot comes over and he says, because he kind of reads people very well, and he says, "What's up? What's the matter with you?" I said, "Just like I'm really confused." He said, "What are you confused about?" I said, "I don't even know that." And he said, "Well, don't be. Don't be confused." And then he wanders off, and at the time I thought this was a bit dumb, but then a time later on, and I was sitting there somewhere, and I realized I'm sitting here quite happy. I'm not too hot, I'm not too cold, I've eaten. Like, where's that confusion? I didn't solve it. I just realized that it's not always there. So all you can do is do the practice. One of the real key things is association with wise people. Pandita Anancha Sewana. It's my name, Pandit, in that line. Association with Pandits, do you see? But it means wise people, so associating with wise people will really help. If you associate with people that are drinking and playing pool and getting involved in the stupid things, then you get the blessing from that. So you get a blessing from what you associate with. So it's really useful to associate yourself with good people and wise settings. I have this question myself at the moment because I have no real home and I'm looking for a new place to live. And some of my options are to go and live by myself. There's a very nice retreat center in Australia, up in the mountains, beautiful, huge trees, hundreds of thousands of hectares of bush, just stretches out. Perfect weather. It's cooler than it's higher up. But I'll be on my own. And big part of the holy life is association with wise people. So I'm thinking of Singapore as one option, but I want to go and live in a temple with other monks because you get that support. So I can't solve that problem. I just say, well, associate with wise people, keep yourself around Dharma, and remember, you don't have to solve all of these problems because you find how to sidestep. Dharma is actually right there, you just miss it. So progressing his Dharma is just remembering it. Oh, it's right there.
Keep it within yourself and not manifest it. And slowly, will you be able to transcend, to have less view, less opinion?
Right.
And yeah.
The problem with this idea is that you're viewing in your life. So, for example, in my life, I have a view about Brexit, I have a view about cats, I have a view about Photoshop, I have a view. So I have like hundreds of thousands of views. How can I be free from views? But if I stop, breathe, and look at myself, there's no views there in this moment of experience. So you just sidestep it. You don't need to solve your views or not have views about things. You just have to be with yourself, and your views have all gone. They're not there in that moment of consciousness, of experience. Yeah. It's not a problem that you have to solve.
Yeah, but that is during your sittings or during your meditation. But in normal life, you tend to have a lot of views and opinions, and you have to make decisions.
Sure.
So, because sometimes when in a group, you will have people with many views. Of course, you have your views as well. So, in order to soften yourself or to improve or somehow to transcend the strong views or strong opinion that you have in the mundane life, do you think like, in this situation, we can like control ourselves like, oh, okay, I have my views, but I keep it within myself. I do not want to manifest it or exert my view, or you
in
slowly,
all of
slowly.
this, you're fighting against yourself. And when you fight against yourself, there's two equal people fighting. The common motif in stories is two equal warriors that neither can get the upper hand over the other. Hector and Achilles fighting each other, they're perfectly equal warriors. Means you're fighting against yourself if you think, well, I have this view and I can't have this view, I have to fight against it. But to fight against this view, I have to have an opposite view. But what happens when you just put all of it down? Like, I haven't got any views here. You sidestep the whole issue. You can't solve those views. Now, there will be times when you're going to have to use a view. For example, if you've got children, and you go to this school and you see what you think, and you go to that school and what you think, you're going to have a view. Which one is the right place for my child? But how much of the time do you really have to have views with you? It's actually a tiny amount of your life that you really need to form views about things. So the rest of the time, notice when the views aren't there. Like, well, I can walk to the station here and not have a single view of anything. Unless I start thinking about things, thinking about Brexit, thinking about breakfast. Let's do that one. You can't solve your views. Use a view when you need to decide which school to send your kids, when you need to decide which hospital to go to for a checkup, when you need to decide what glasses to get. Sure, have a view. But how much of your life do you really need views for? Most of the time, you can eat and walk, make a cup of tea. No views there. Yeah. You can't solve them, right? That's never going to work.
So you just let it come and let it go.
Well, if you find views and opinions arising in you, yes, you teach yourself to let it go. But do notice when those views or that view isn't there. Right? And then you learn to distrust your views a bit. I'm lucky in this regard because I have like really, really lousy views and opinions. Really, I have the worst. And I've learned this so many times. I gave this example the other day. A guy came to the temple and he ordained as a monk. He had reasonable English, so he kind of hooked onto me a little bit. And he'd had an operation to remove a length of his intestines. It's a reasonably common operation in Thailand. I've never heard of it in England or other countries, but in Thailand they do this. So he'd come to the temple to recover from his operation. And I said, this is a bad idea. Look, you've just had a reasonably major operation. The doctors are telling you to control your food and diet so it's going to pass easily through your repaired intestines. And you're going to be eating bad food in the temple. They give you oily food and rich food and fried food, because that's the Thai tradition. I said, that's bad. You're going to be sleeping on the floor instead of on a sensible bed. You have no air conditioning in the temple. You have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go arms round. I said, you're nuts. Don't come to the temple for recovery. Do you agree with me? Yeah, well, we're all totally wrong. He loved being in the temple. He recovered speedily and healthily, and he stayed for a year because he liked it so much. So, great as my view was, I was just completely and utterly wrong. And that was a turning point for me, actually, that I started to realize, you know what, my views and opinions may not be that great. So, I'm much better now at letting them go. Yeah. But yeah, you have views and opinions, but not much of the time. Most of the time you're not using them. Okay, anybody else? It's 9:30, last question, and then we're wrapping up for this year's series of Sutta classes.
I try to make it short and quick. There's this 5 khandhas, and I've heard of someone who says that about recognizing the 5 khandhas happening during daily life, and yeah. So my question is it useful and helpful to do that, or actually we don't really have to do that? That means we don't have to like notice that, oh, we recognize form, and then is there feeling that arise, and is there fabrication and all that? Or should we just simplify it and, like, as you said, just notice like when the mind is engaged on something, and then just come back to it, engage and then come back to it. Yeah, thank you.
The only real answer to that is you keep just doing Dharma, keep reading books, and then at different times, different teachings will make sense for you. And sometimes there's a whole thing that, it doesn't... I was never big on the 5 khandhas. It wasn't my favorite teaching. I like the 6 senses. That's my go-to teaching. But at different times, different things suddenly snap into place and make sense to you. Sometimes you use this one, sometimes you use that model. So just, you fumble your way there. We're all kind of in ignorance. We're all not enlightened. We're all trying to find our way. So you just pull these things in, and if it doesn't make sense, you leave it on the back burner. If you disagree with it, just leave it on the back burner. Maybe at a later time, it'll snap into place. So I think just do what you can, do what's making sense for you at the moment. And if it doesn't, just leave it, let it marinate there for a while. Yeah. Okay, are we all good?
Yes,
okay,
Bhante.
so that's the end of the Sutta series.
Yes.
I want to do the little blessing.
Yes, but they'd like to share merits as well.
Okay.
So tomorrow, Bhante's talk will be on Smarter Than Your Average Genius at about after 2:20, after the youth do their small puja. And then Sunday will be his last talk on the clockwork universe. So do come for the last 2. And if you like to support Bhante, you can also pass me or Jenny the envelopes or the ang paos, and we will ask Sister Winnie to send over the money. So Bhante will help us do the sharing of merits and then the blessing for the end of the Sutta class.
How do you mean the sharing of merits?
Etavata and idang me nyatinang hotu? No.
Okay, go ahead. I'll catch on to what you're doing.
Okay, let's do Eta Avata. Okay. Eta Vata Cha Amhehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Deva Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Eta Vata Cha Amhehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Bhuta Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Ettavata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya. Let's share merits with all our departed relatives and friends. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Yatha varivaha pura paripuranti sakarang ewa mewa itotinang petanang upakapati ichitang patitang tumham kipamewa samijatu sabe purantu sangapa chanto banaraso yatha manicho diraso yatha Sabitiyo vivajantu sabharogo vinasatu mate bhavat vantarayo sukhi digayuko bhava abhiva dhanasili sanichang vuddha pachayino chattaro dhamma vadanti ayuvano sukhang balang. Okay.